Scratch, get away from it. Hello guys and welcome. Today we're gonna be going through the level 6 spells for Baldur's Gate 3 tier list. So we're gonna look at the spells, see what they do, talk about them, and then set them from godlike to garbaggio, basically. So let's get straight to it. So we start with Arcane Gate. For 10 turns, it links 2 teleportation portals, which anybody can use to travel between the 2 locations. The only actual use that I can think about this is if you ever have to travel or transfer your entire party from one area to another and you cannot jump, you're trying to chase some sort of encounter or move around somewhere you shouldn't be, this would work. For me, you can just use Misty Step or an Amulet of Misty Step or a Scroll of Misty Step. Dimension Door. Effectively, an Arcane Gate, in my opinion, is not the strongest spell you can use your 6th level spell slot for. So for me, it's more of a D tier. There can be some uses of it, but I just don't see it. Up next, we have the Blade Barrier. Well, we try to not kill Scratch. What does this do? It creates a barrier of blades. This is gorgeous. And anybody that tries to go through the barrier will effectively take a lot of damage. Enemies can fly over it, but if they try to walk through it, 39 damage. 60-10 slashing damage for a deck save, it's not that great. The difficult terrain is not gonna decrease the movement speed of your enemies by much, because they're not gonna move horizontally through it, right? I guess there might be some areas, and if you combo it with Wall of Stone, you might get it to proc more than once, but overall it should only work once. So you could still push enemies into the blades. It looks gorgeous, and it's a really fun spell to use for crowd control and for battlefield control. I definitely like it. I just think that Wall of Fire, which is a level 4 spell, does 5d8 fire damage. Yes, the type is a little bit worse. Just feels like there's better options than this. In my opinion, I would put this in the B tier. It's okay, it's good, but it's not amazing. Up next, we have Globe of Invulnerability. So how does this work? You create a globe, create a barrier that makes creatures and objects inside it immune to all damage. So the spell is actually pretty cool. It's very unique. The problem I have with it is that you're using your action to make an area immune in which your enemies can also benefit. It would have to be a ranged fight for this to be worthwhile. I assume it would be useful in the final fight and in other fights as well. So I'm not just gonna off it off the bat. It just, I feel like there might be better options. However, it's still a pretty strong spell. Very unique effect. I would put it in the A tier because it's really, really unique in what it can do. Up next, we have Chain Lightning. And to be honest, Chain Lightning is one of the spells that I really, really like. Since I'm a Storm Sorcerer enthusiast, right? I'm really affiliated with that. What is important to note here, when it comes to lightning damage, if the enemy is wet, or an ally by the way, they get this condition right here. Lightning and cold vulnerability. So now, when we cast Lightning Bolt, they take double damage. Keep in mind that once you cast the spell, additional bolts will leap to nearby enemies. So effectively, you can do 20d8 times 4 on 4 enemies if you make them wet first. So I will say the damage possibilities with this spell are pretty high. It's some sort of mini AoE spell. If you are dealing with more than 4 enemies, then there might be better options for you. But the fact that it can benefit from the wet condition, it gives it a step ahead from all the other damaging spells. So up next we have Circle of Death. So Circle of Death is a Constitution save spell. You can target a creature within an area, and around it you deal 8d6 necrotic damage. So 8d6 is fireball level of damage, but this is a necrotic spell. If you're actually using the Staff of Cherished Necromancy, this spell is actually really, really good. It will force enemy creatures to have disadvantage against your saving throws. So the fact that its constitution is not gonna affect it as much. And it's gonna heal you back and gain life essence, which will also allow you to cast spells for free. So this is a really, really good spell when you're using that stuff. However, or when you're playing a Necromancer Wizard, really. However, overall, I would say that its damage is not amazing, but necrotic damage is better than fire damage, especially in Act 3. So, unique, big area, strong effect, looks good. I wouldn't say it's bad. Probably goes in the B tier with Blade Barrier, but if you're using the items, it can be considered A tier. Up next we have Create Undead. Now, Create Undead does require a body. So here comes the mummy. Oh, mummy, mummy, mummy. So this spell allows you to summon a mummy from a corpse. What is the damage that the mummy does? It's not that great, but it has multi-attack. However, for her to be able to do twice as much DPS, which makes her quite a bit better if she can do that, the target needs to be frightened. So in order to do that, you would have to be using spells like Fear or Smites that scare the enemy, or AoE scare effects. It can be useful, but if it requires setup for just an average of 20.5 damage, you're using an action from a different character, it doesn't feel that good. However, you can have 4 mummies out in the party. They are undead, right? So do benefit from the Circle of Bones buffs. So it has good HP, it has good armor class, it's vulnerable to fire, which is a little bit sad really, but it is immune to poison and necrotic damage, and resistance to bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing from non-magical attacks. So you could combo this spell with something like Cloud Kill. It has its own way of scaring an enemy, but it's a wisdom save, and it's pretty low if I recall correctly. Let's just make sure. Yeah, the DC is 11, which is quite bad in my opinion, and it's using its own action to scare an enemy so that it can multi-attack, and if this fails, you basically wasted the turn. So it doesn't feel great in my opinion. It does look like walk like a Deva though, which is pretty cool, and it's very Halloween themed. I would say just because it's not concentration, it's just free, and if you use something like Arcane Battery, you can just get this out, right? I would probably put it in the S tier because of that reason. It's not gonna break your game, but you can make this work, and it's useful. It's always good to have an extra summon with you. It will trigger some NPCs. Maybe it's A tier. It's A tier if you couldn't cast 6 level spells more than one. Maybe it's even C tier if that's the case. But because there's a lot of items that give you arcane battery in the game, in which this means that you can effectively use a 6th level spell slot more than once. So this is S tier, in my opinion. Eyebite. Your eyes become black, corridors. While concentrating, you may cast Eyebite without expending a spell slot. So you cast this on yourself once. You cast this once, and you can either force a creature to sleep, fear it, or sicken it, giving it disadvantage on ability checks and rolls. Now, using a 6th level spell slot so that you can make an enemy have giving a creature disadvantage on attack rolls and checks for your concentration is not great. However, you are able to resummon it, to recast it over and over. You can also set a creature to sleep. However, half-elves in this scenario are immune to being forced to sleep. You're using your action every turn to cast fear or give disadvantage or make an enemy sleep. The sleep part might be good, but Hypnotic Pattern is already better than this spell. So in my opinion, it's a pretty bad spell. Don't use this. I know that it also works on any type of creatures, right? So this is good when you're fighting something you can't hold person, but there's also a spell called Hold Monster. It just feels a little bit underwhelming, in my opinion. It's a wisdom save, and there's a lot of good wisdom saves. You could even make something fight for you for a lower spell slot. So don't like it. Definitely don't like it. Garbaggio. It can be useful though. Okay, I'll put it in the D tier. I'm not gonna be too mean to this spell. So Heroic Fist. What does this do? You and all creatures around you can't be poisoned, diseased, or frightened. Your HP increases and you make wisdom saves with advantage until long rest. Now, this is an amazing way to use a 6th level spell slot. As you saw, it gave 12 HP, thoroughly staffed condition to everyone around here when we cast it. So it's very good to cast this at the start of your day. It really is a very, very good buff, and so it also gives you camp supplies. Definitely a really cool spell, definitely very useful. It's a very strong buff. I think it's only positive. It also works on your summons and your ghouls, and it can increase their HP and make them really, really tanky. You could end up having a ghoul go from 20 HP if you give it 6th level 8 and 6th level Heroic Fist, plus 37 HP, plus advantage on wisdom saving throws, can be frightened, can be diseased or poisoned, yeah, sure. And generally, this is really, really, really strong. For me, this is a godlike tier spell. It has so much potential. It's a permanent buff that's not concentration, so why not use Arcane Battery? There's 2 staffs in the game that give you this ability. Do 8 with the second Arcane Battery, and then you could even summon a Deva or something. So, in my opinion, it's a very strong spell. The summon Planar Ally, which can be used to summon a Djinni, a Deva, or a Cambion. Now, let's look at the 3 options together. Here's the Cambion. I'm gonna use the 5th level spell to summon the Deva, but it's the same stats. So, Cambion. I do talk about the summons, by the way, in a different video. As you can see, the Cambion, generally when it comes to stats, is much worse off than the Deva. It has less HP, its major attack really, it's Ray of Fire, which is 96, 3 rolls of 96. You can also do like a Fiendish Charm with draining Kiss, but that does even less damage, and it takes 2 turns, and it requires the enemy to not fail any wisdom save, which is horrible. So in my opinion, Deva is much, much, much better than Cambion. Alternative option, though, is the Djinni, which is, in my opinion, the only other candidate that instead of Deva. And the Djinni is even tankier than the Deva. It can do a Thunder Wave for 5d8. It can create gales. Not this type of gale. It can poison enemies as an AoE, and this works really well if you are using AoE poison abilities in general. So, like Cloud Kill, if you're using zombies and Cloud Kill, this can also work really well with that type of team. It is immune to lightning and thunder, so if you're ever fighting something that's primarily doing that type of damage, consider using a Djinni instead of anything else. It could definitely solo the encounter in such a scenario. But yeah, overall, for me, this spell has a lot of versatility. You can summon the demon, you can summon the Djinni, you can summon the Deva, and all of them are really good. Even Cambion is pretty useful, right? However, it's worse than the other ones. So in my opinion, pretty good. It's got like tier. You get another ally on your party for just the use of a spell slot. And you can use Arcane Battery to summon the monsters, so you don't have to worry about what's going on. Up next, we have Disintegrate. So how does Disintegrate work? This spell deals 10d6 plus 40 force damage. If it kills the enemy, it outright instantaneously deletes their entire body. It's good damage, but it's not amazing damage. So it deals an average of 75 damage when the enemy fails. If they save, they take no damage. So it is a bit risky, but you can always use heightened meta magic with it if you're a sorcerer. Very good spell, very good damage. I would say it's a little bit less damage than Chain Lightning, and it is single target. It can be twinned though, and when you twin it, it does rival the Chain Lightning damage. However, on a fail, it deals no damage, so I would say it's A tier, not S tier. Following up, we have Flesh to Stone. So over time, this spell will turn an enemy into stone. If they fail this saving throw 3 times in a row, well, 3 out of 5 times that they're gonna be checked, they do end up being turned to stone. And then they stay as a stone petrified statue, and you can only heal them by casting Greater Restoration on them. Now, this is a really cool spell which can have some unique effects. I'm not 100% certain how it would work, maybe if you petrified somebody in the grove and then... But yeah. The problem with this spell, and what I don't like about it, is that it takes 3 to 5 turns to activate, right? Because the enemy needs to fail 3 times, and it is a con save. In my opinion, this spell is really bad to use during combat, so it's garbage tier. There might be some really cool creative uses outside of combat. If you can stealth cast this on an enemy and then let them turn into stone and then go back, long rest, come back again, stealth cast it again, or use Arcane Battery and get basically half of the enemy team turned into stone before you walk into the fight. That could work. Or if you want to save a certain NPC before having an encounter, this might be creative, and there can be a lot of uses for this. I'm not 100% certain how all of those would work. But yeah, it's a cool spell, but not good enough to be considered in my tier list as a good spell. Following up, we have the Harm spell. Now the Harm spell deals pretty simply 14d6 necrotic damage, and it reduces the enemy's hit points, or the target's hit points, until long rest. As you can see, the target's hit points were reduced by the amount of damage they took. What do I think about this spell? First of all, Wisdom Constitution save, not ideal. However, the damage is pretty good. It's single target. It's a cleric spell, and clerics do need some sort of way to deal damage. So while I like it, I think the Throne is better, and that's a level 5 spell. You can effectively use both only once per day, right? So in my humble opinion, this is a C tier spell. It's single target, it does less damage than Disintegrate. It's necrotic type. It's a con save. It's hard to make work. Up next we have Heal. Heal a target's wounds or remove blindness and any diseases. What is the range? Melee range. So that's not great. As you can see, it's good for healing. It's 70 flat. It's not bad. It's definitely not bad. It can also cure some conditions. It's effectively something that should be used when you're in a really tough situation and you have no better use for your 6th level spell slot. You're always going to have a better use for it. And if you really care about healing that much, you can just go for a life cleric and do like 50 healing in AoE instead of single target. I would put this in the B tier. It can be useful, it can be good, it's just not amazing. It's really hard for level 6 spells to be bad, to be honest. Up next we have Otiluke's Freezing Sphere. Now the damage on this spell is 10d6. You create a sphere, a freezing sphere that lasts for 10 turns. You can cast this just to do the damage instantly, or you can make it into a pocket version, and then you can throw this item. Now, alternatively, what you can do is you can pickpocket an enemy, and then you can put the freezing sphere, or as many as you have created, into their pocket, and then you can just walk away and watch the explosion happen. But the character needs to be faced away from. As a sneak explosion spell. This is a really cool creative use for it. And 10d6 cold damage is just a little bit worse than Cone of Cold, which is 8d8. However, if you just want to do 10d6, you might as well do the spell Wall of Ice. It's much better for controlling the battlefield. They take 10d6 frost damage. However, and then if the enemy breaks the wall, then they take damage if they try to pass through it. You can really use this to block enemies from going where to split the enemy party, and then if they break through the wall, if they are forced to break through the wall and they can't blink or fly over it, then they are forced to take additional damage. All in all, a really cool spell. If Otiluke's Freezing Sphere is A tier because it has a lot of creative uses and good damage, and cold damage is much better. Actually, it might even be S tier, because cold damage can be really effective on wet targets. Well, this is also S tier. It might even be godlike tier. Let's say it's S tier as well, because this is a line and this is a sphere. Definitely both of them are really, really, really good because wet condition is a thing. Then up next we have Otto's Irresistible Dance. Cause a creature to start dancing, making it unable to take actions or move. Disadvantage on attack rolls and saving throws. It lasts for 10 turns, and it is a wisdom save. So the enemy has to start doing this. Apparently there is no save for it. But they do try to save once every turn. So this is guaranteed that the enemy will lose their first turn. I do like the memes that can be made with Otto's Irresistible dance. However, I feel like if I'm going to force wisdom saving throws on the enemy, I'd rather just use hold person or hold monster. So this is purely worse. Or just use dominate person or any other useful spell. This will not even prevent the enemy from attacking. In my opinion, this is a pretty bad spell. This is a meme tier spell. This is good for memeing, not for anything else. In my opinion, in my humble opinion. I know that many people love this spell. I just don't find it as useful. Maybe it's a bit better than Eyebite. Maybe, is it though? Because they effectively do the same thing. They waste an enemy's turn, and this is recastable. This is concentration, and it is also concentration, so pretty bad. Pretty awful of a spell. Up we have Windwalk, and what Windwalk
of the Mahasabadama Mirage
does is that it will allow for you and your allies nearby to be turned into mists. And when you're turned into a mist, you have a resistance to almost any type of damage apart from psychic vulnerability, and you can fly. You cannot do damage, but your resistance to any type of damage is very useful when sneaking around into areas, etc. And then whenever you want, you can just be turned back. So what I would say, this might be a cool way to use your party, to have your party fly over an obstacle if they cannot fly. But then again, there's many other creative methods for doing that. So in my opinion, while it's a cool spell, it does something very unique, there's many better alternatives when it comes to traversing hard terrain. So pretty D tier for me. I would never use this. Okay. Garbage tier. Let's look at Sunbeam. What it does, 68 damage in a line. So it's fireball level of damage, but it's radiant, right? It does the damage. Seems to be some sort of bug in the game. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. But for me, when I use this spell, I cannot resummon it within the next 10 turns. Maybe this will be fixed down the line. Right now it's just it looks like lightning bolt, and it does radiant damage, similar, but it cannot be recast, and that's a little bit of a problem in my opinion. So once they fix this, this will be a much better spell. But right now it's just pretty bad. I'll put it in C tier because radiant damage is pretty useful. But I would say that 68 in a line is not that great of a damage. Like, you could do lightning bolt by making the enemy wet, and that's a 3rd level spell, and it would do double as much damage. So not really cool. Up next we have Wall of Thorn. This quarters the enemy's movement speed whenever it's used. First of all, this looks amazing. And when an enemy tries to walk through this, say that they were trapped inside, they're gonna take a lot of damage. They are gonna get entangled. Their movement speed is gonna be really slow. Can they break the vines? It is affected by fireball, unfortunately. Let's see what happens when we try to walk through it. You still take damage. Whatever grapples you goes away. The quartered movement speed goes away when you set it on fire, but the damage remains. In my opinion, this is one of the coolest spells for control. It competes with Wall of Ice. I would say arguably it can be even better, so this is S tier when it comes to this type of spells. Finally, we only have one spell left, which is Power Word Kill. Now, to get Power Word Kill, you need to be playing as a Dark Edge. There's some sort of there's something you need to do to get this spell. I use the mod to get this, just so that I can showcase it. Effectively what it does, you command a creature with 100 HP or lower to die instantly. Here it is. 100 hit points or fewer to die instantly. The good thing is that you know exactly how much hit points each creature does, right? So this is really, really good. See, instant death, no saves, no death saves, nothing. They just die. Can we make withers die? Nope. This spell, in my opinion, is S tier. I wouldn't say it's godlike tier. While it is a level 9 spell, and we're comparing it with 6 level spells, my problem is that all of the spells that we're seeing, like Chain Lightning, can do that type of damage. And Disintegrate can get very close to that type of damage. Chain Lightning can even surpass that damage. And this is single target. I guess being able to instantly kill someone without saves, without any shenanigans, is pretty useful. But they need to be below 100 HP, and sometimes they're not. So I would put it in the S tier because it's pretty useful to be able to kill anybody at 100 HP. So one action 100 HP, not bad. But I wouldn't say it's godlike. Right, so this is the list. Effectively, let's conclude the list. Heroic Feast and Summon Planar Ally are in the godlike tier because of how strong they both can be. They give you a permanent boost to your party. The HP can be rehealed. The buffs are really, really strong when it comes to the Heroic Feast, and having an additional ally that is very useful can be a very big advantage. Then in the S tier, we have some strong crowd control effects. 2 spells that do really good damage because they scale with a wet condition. Create Mummy, which is slightly worse than the Deva. It's still pretty good, but it's a little bit worse, therefore it goes in a different tier. And Power Word Kill. Then in the A tier, we have the Global Invulnerability, Circle of Death, and Disintegrate. These spells are really useful, and then they can be much, much better if you play around them, if you can make an enemy held, if you use the stuff of Necromancy, or if you're fighting in a ranged battle where the enemy cannot walk inside your sphere. In B, we have some spells that are useful, like Heal and Blade Barrier, which are outshined a bit by other spells in the game and abilities. Then in tier C, we have some spells that can be good, it's just that they feel a little bit off. And they're both damaging spells. Sunbeam would have been better if it was spammable, but it's not. For some reason, it's a little bit bug at the moment. And then in the D tier, we have some crowd controlling spells that are outshined by lower level spells. And we also have Arcane Gate, which is effectively garbage. But we were nice enough to say that it can have some uses. And then in the garbage tier, we have the Flesh to Stone. Not because it's a bad spell. It can be useful outside of combat, but during combat it's horrible. And we also have Windwalk, which can only be used to access certain areas because it gives flight. And effectively it's very similar to Arcane Gate. I would say it might even be a little bit different because this can be used while sneaking. This will probably break your sneak. So all in all, this is the list, guys. Please let me know what you think in the comments. If you agree, if you disagree, if you like this type of content, like the video. And yeah, thank you for watching, guys. See you around.